Welcome to Experts Explain Trauma. Today we've got Dr. Nay joining us to answer a common question that survivors ask themselves, as well as giving us tips to help us on our healing journey. So here's the question. Why am I staying with someone who hurts me over and over again?
Okay, so that's a great question because you wonder, why am I staying with somebody who hurts me over and over again? And so there's a few reasons why. And the first reason why is that when you are in a toxic relationship or a trauma bond, you experience something called intermittent reinforcement, meaning 70% of the time the person is usually cruel, abusive, controlling, 30% of the kind, generous, and helpful. So, first of all, that creates two things. The 30% that they're kind gives you hope, and hope is the hook that keeps you stuck. Okay. But also, the two masks that they wear, the Dirty John and the Romeo, that's what I call those two sides, they create something called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the confusion that you feel inside when you're trapped in an abusive relationship because you're constantly asking, is he good or is he bad? Because sometimes he's good, right? Or am I crazy or is he crazy? Or is the relationship good or bad? And so hope is the hook. And then cognitive dissonance is the glue, and it keeps you very confused because you can never land on an answer.
Exactly. And the other thing that they tend to do is completely catch you off guard. So you
Yeah,
think things are going along just fine, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, they're mad or whatever.
that's right. That's right. So that's right. So you never ever can see it coming. That's why it's not a cycle of abuse, like
Okay.
people like to call it. It's intermittent.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with us per se. And so how do we work through this?
Well, so the way that you work through it is that you have to realize that you're actually not with a person that has two personalities or has two personas. You're with the Romeo part is also manipulative and pathological and harming.
Right.
Just harming is the Dirty John part. And so you have to really start to integrate those two sides as they're not Romeo and Dirty John. They are one pathological manipulative partner. And you need to keep saying that to yourself over and over again to really dissolve that cognitive dissonance. And then you also need to make a fact sheet. And when you do leave, and
Mhm.
it can be hard to leave when stay away when you do leave, go back to the facts of all the horrible things that they've done. Get out of the longing and the feeling.
I can completely relate to the back and forth, and that hope. And I would hang on to that little bit of hope. There was this darkness, and then there would be that little bit of hope. And then it would be like, oh, there it is. Okay, now we're going to go down a different direction. And I did 25 years of that. That was really tough. That was tough.
No, it is really tough. And if you're an empathetic, trusting, kind, loyal person, right, those beautiful qualities get weaponized against you by this pathological individual.
I find it very interesting and very enlightening where you say, don't look at them separately, but as one. And when
Yeah.
you were saying that, I was literally in my mind realizing that the what do you call them?
Romeo and Dirty John.
Romeo, yeah. So Romeo, when he is being kind, and that's all manipulation.
Correct.
They don't, would you say they don't have the capacity to give you empathy at all?
They can they can feign empathy,
Right.
think that it's going to work for them, but genuine empathy, because if they had real empathy, they wouldn't keep harming you.
I know.
It
I
would see
know.
what it has on you, right?
Yes, and and here was my cycle. So he would act up and do something. We'd have a big, fight, and then there would be the little honeymoon phase where for a couple weeks he's really behaving himself, and I fall into the trap of thinking, okay, this time. I used to say that to myself all the time. This time it's different. And then it's like they get relaxed again, like they feel like they're back in and they start getting relaxed.
Yes,
And then they show their true colors again. And then another shenanigan would get pulled.
that's right.
That is, and it got to the point where I was falling into that cycle. And then I could see the cycle, but I didn't know how to stop the cycle.
Right, right,
That's even more maddening, honestly.
right, right. Exactly. You want to get off the merry-go-round of madness.
Right, right. And so I would see this and I would see it coming. And even when I'm in the middle of this, I don't know, fiasco with him, carfuffle, uh,
Yeah,
it would, I would sit there thinking, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? Why am I arguing? And then I find, for me, I just finally had enough. Like I looked back and I saw all the chaos in my life, and I kept trying to get away from the chaos, but I kept putting myself in the chaos.
right.
And so I finally had had enough for me.
Yeah, and that's also another reason why people leave. They're like enough, right?
Yeah.
They had enough. Yeah.
And then the hard part is the separating of the two lives. That
Of
was what was so, I mean, we were so embedded together.
right.
His family was my family, and that was one of the hardest.
Of course it is. Yeah.
So what's the first thing you would suggest to somebody who's starting to see this cycle? They're starting to see this repetitive cycle in their life. They're maybe at that point where they're seeing it and they're like I was, where they're frustrated and they don't know what's the first step I should do.
So the first step is once you realize that you are in a toxic, dysfunctional trauma bond, you have to really have radical acceptance of that because we have no desire to change something until we really have awareness of it. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to have radical acceptance. Okay, I am in a toxic, dysfunctional relationship. And then what you need to do is you need to plan behind the scenes. You need to, once you make that internal decision, you don't need to share it with your partner. Because remember, anything you say to them is going to fall on deaf ears or it's going to get twisted against you. It's going to
Yeah.
get blamed. You're going to get talked out of it. You're going to get gaslit. So don't waste your breath on them. What I say to do is now you wear the mask
Mm-hmm.
and now you start to plan behind the scenes. You act like everything's fine with them. Don't let them see you coming. And it depends on, if you're married or not. If you're married, you got to get a divorce attorney. You got to, actually consult them, get a good therapist. I just started a community online for women, a trauma bond community where women can go and get support because you need support. But you need to get a bank account in your own name, a credit card in your own name, right? You really need to plan and strategize, and you need to have really good self care.
Mm-hmm.
This trauma bond is very destabilizing and very dysregulating. And so self care really will help us stabilize because, you could be in for the fight of your life because we know that the research shows that when a woman leaves can be the most dangerous time. So that's why you wear the mask. You don't let them see you coming. You build a fortress of support and resources for yourself, and then you escape.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I would recommend. I'm so glad that what I was thinking was right. And that's what I always recommend to them is
Mhm.
that you do everything in secret. And that's actually what I was going to do with my second husband. I was doing everything in secret, and when the time came, I was going to leave and leave everything but my clothes behind.
Right? Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, because
Literally.
that's how desperate you feel at the end, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. You just had
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And,
always say I left with my kids and my curtains.
oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so, yeah, what you're saying is really important for a lot of reasons as far as not sharing what you plan on doing. And the number one reason is the danger. And I know the statistics, I don't know what they are, but I've seen them before where it is the most dangerous time is when the woman leaves the relationship. And
Yeah.
so you do need to make sure. I'm actually working with a lady who's going to be getting out of a 25-year narcissistic marriage, and she's in a good financial position, and so she's getting all her ducks in a row behind the scenes,
Right.
getting an attorney, getting a therapist, having the support people around her because she doesn't have very many friends, because guess what he didn't allow
I
her to have friends. Yep, isolated her.
yeah.
And so she has the support of her family, and she's gonna pull the trigger pretty soon. And so yeah, that is very important that you make sure that you're in a safe place. That I think is the number one thing.
Yes, for sure.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nay. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
If this question resonated with you, let us know in the comments. And if you have a question that you'd like answered, you can email me at asklisatickle@gmail.com. Be sure to follow so that you can get more insightful information about trauma healing.